the rear brake pads and rotors on a Mercedes W163, a 2003 ML500. First you have to take the wheels off, the 17mm socket. I have this nifty little wrench. Works pretty nicely. Alright, pop this off. Okay, there we go. These kind of scored pretty badly, so we need to, I bought some new rotors and pads. Okay, now these rotors, or these calipers, are held in by pins, and also you have a torque spit, hex head, and that bolt here you have to take out. I'm going to get the tools to do that, and I'll be right back. With this caliper, it's held on by some pins. Your brake pads are with some pins. Okay, so what you have to do, first thing you do is unhook your brake sensor. It's a little rubber cap thing. You pull off. Use a little screwdriver and pry that off. Just a little rubber boot thingy. This one's kind of being stubborn. Okay. Okay, stop. Pops out like that. Just leave it hanging loose. Okay, then you take here's your two pins. There's a pin right here, pin right here. It goes from this side to the end, and there's two like ears on the brake pads that they go through to hold it on. Now there's a metal, like a spring clip here. Remember, watch how that comes out. It goes under your pins, under each pin and under each pin, and that springs and holds the brake pads in place. What I usually do is get a hammer, and I'll start these pins. I'll give them a little wrap on this side, like that. Start them through. Then I'll get either a small screwdriver, or if you have a punch, that'll work. You just put them right here, and you hit, and you can see in the back the pin is coming through. Okay, you can go ahead and knock it all the way through. All right, bottom one. There you go. That top pin's coming out. Okay, you can maybe get a pair of pliers and pull that through, or you can just continue with your punch, driving it out. And that really is the only thing holding the pads in there. I think on this one I might need a little bigger screwdriver. This is a little Torx driver, but this one needs a little bit more convincing. Maybe a little PB blaster on this might help. Okay, action. Okay, now we keep driving with this. What you want is the screwdriver or punch exactly that size. Or what you can do is you can get some vice grips, work really well for this. You can go through here, go in the back, clip on to the head of that pin, and just hammer on this. Kind of work that. Now when you gotta that thing's not participating too well. A little bigger convincing screwdriver, put it on the head of that pin, and as you can see, it's coming out now. Alright, get my pliers, lock on it, work it a little bit. There you go. That's what those pins look like. Just remember, they always come forward and go through the tops of your brake pads. I'll show you how to put them back on. What I usually do on these though is I'll polish them up, take some sandpaper and clean them up, because this is what your brake pads slide on, and you want them to slide freely, otherwise they might bind and lock up. So I'm going to work on the bottom one and get the bottom one. That'll give you an idea how to get these pins out. Okay, what you can do also, if they're really stubborn, like this one's hasn't been done for quite a while, it's kind of rusty, you put the vice grips on the head of the pin, and then you take the hammer and tap it, and it comes out like that. Now watch this. Here's the clip I was telling you about. This clip slides in there, and these pins go over the top to hold the pads in. When I replace them, I'll show you this again. But take this out. I clean this up a little bit too. Take the same either steel wool or sandpaper and clean this up a little bit. Okay. Now there's a couple bolts. When you we're going to take this couple, I think 18mm bolts. We're going to take this caliper off too, so we can get the brake pads out. Okay, we'll be back in a second. Okay, there's two bolts that are holding the caliper on. They're this one and then one down below. They are 18mm. Pretty much any they're pretty tight, but just get on them and take them off. Nothing surprising is going to happen when that happens. There's just make sure when you take it off, it doesn't dangle or drop or shock this rubber brake hose, because that's kind of important. It can possibly break it. Just kind of place it down, and also your pads will be part of that. So take this off. Alright, they're 18mm bolts. This will come off pretty easily. Okay, and here's your pads. Your pads without the pins will pull right out. Okay, and then there's the one with the sensor on it. Okay, now what you'll need to do is I have some vice grips, some long nose vice grips, and we'll need to push these pistons in. We'll squeeze them. What I'll do is I'll put this right here. See, it doesn't fall down, and then we'll okay, you ready? As I told you, we have to squeeze the pistons in on the calipers. So I have these long nose vice grips. You can kind of do it with some C-clamps, long nose vice grips are the best way to do it. So you get your vice grip set and you squeeze, and you can see it's going in. You just squeeze it in like that as far as you can. Now this one will come out. This is kind of a push me pull you, but you go back and forth and you push it in. They'll kind of go in a little bit each time on each side, and you push them in as far as you possibly can. Okay, see, they're both just about as far as we can get them at this point. Okay, one more time, we'll probably get it. There we go. There we go. All right. Okay, now we're going to replace the rotor. This is a 5mm hex head. You take this screw off. Okay. I'll set that right here. Okay, now this sometimes will need a little bit of convincing to come off. What you do is you take a big hammer and you pound on the inside here. You may need to turn it some and continue to pound. It will come off, but sometimes it needs a lot of convincing with a hammer on the back side. Okay, you can also you can't use a puller on this because the threads are not in the caliper, so you have to pound because it kind of presses itself around this center portion. So let me get a hammer and I'm gonna start doing some.
Okay.
Ready? Okay. Sometimes you need a little bit of hammer to convince this. One of the reasons why is the emergency brake is on the inside of this, and those little shoes like to hold on to it. So you take this and you go like that. Okay, comes off. These pads are acceptable. You just need some pad on there. Okay, what I'm going to do is I'm going to wipe the schmutz off of it. All right. Okay, here's your new one. Make sure when you put it on, your screw holes line up right here. That'll line up everything else. So you go in here. Right. Goes on easier, it comes off. So you line up your screw hole here. All right. Take your screw, your hex head screw, and put it back on. There you go. Okay, now what you want to do is start putting your pads back in. Okay, you're going to have two different types of pads. Well, these actually are, you can put these the same. Okay, this little notch right here is where your sensor fits in. There's a little hole that your sensor is going to slide into. So you take you can reuse these. Some people buy new ones. If it's not to the wear part where this isn't yet, you don't really have to. So you put your little pin from your sensor into the hole there. Okay, and then there's a little slot where this slides in. Just kind of try to line them all up. Make sure you don't bend that little pin. That's kind of important. So if you line it up with the hole and line your slot up here at the top, you can actually just take your little hammer here, kind of sometimes these things don't like to cooperate. Oops. We'll try the other one. Sometimes there we go. Okay, there we go. There we go. Okay, now what you do is you put this and you line up your little ears with the holes in it where your pins are going to go through. You push it in as far as you can. Have this. Sometimes there's a little bit of stuff. Let's use the sandpaper here real quick to clean this up. This one's got a little age and a little rust and a little experience on it, so sometimes you have to clean these things up a little bit. All right. They aren't fitting very good. Okay. Ready? Okay. Now we're back. Get your new brake pads. After you put your sensor in there, you can slide them in. You can see the holes where these pins come through. So you want to line up your little ears, holes, so your pin comes through here. Pin slides through. Okay, you want to just do that, just enough to hold it in there. Get your other pin, same for the other side. Just slide it in there like that. Now you want to remember where your little spring top came in. Remember I told you about this thing. These go on these little tabs on the top. This you can just fold down out of the side. That plugs in there. We'll do that later. Okay, you want to put this one in. All right, slide that down in there. Now this kind of gets a little tricky here. You do these, you have to hold that there. This, remember, goes on top of these little pads right there. Hold your brake pad from the bottom. Place your pad there. Now these pins slide over these little grooves on the top of this little spring. Okay, so you kind of do one at a time. You slide your pin in, right, through, right-handed, so this is kind of hard. So it just pops into this other side. See how that's in there? Okay, now you can do the other side. You kind of push this little spring down. Slide the pin over that, like that. Hold that there. Sometimes this one, though, you need a little help. So you do this. This will kind of shift over a little bit. It's okay. There you go. Get it there. If you can push this down, that helps slide the pin in. Okay, then that last little bit, you might need a little bit of convincing. See, it's popped through. Okay, that pin is in. This pin, you might need a little something, a little screwdriver to get right here. This last little bit of space, whoops. last little. Smaller hammer. Let's try this. There we go. See, your pins are popped in there. Oh, you want to make sure your little spring's centered up. It slid around a little bit. No problem. We'll get our screwdriver. Oops. Get our screwdriver. Center it up. There we go. It's all centered up. A little bit off. I think it's right there's about good. See, that keeps pressure on the pads, keeps them in place, and then they slide on top of there. So what you want to do is you can see there like so, and then this slides over your rotor. Okay. Then you want to put those two 18mm bolts in, and you're done. You want to plug this back in. So I plug that in. Once you put your two 18mm bolts in the back, you're done.